reconvene. It's approximately 5:32. Today is Wednesday, February 28th. And this is the budget hearing for the 2024-2025 budget year. And tonight is our Board of Education operations discussion. I think we know everybody. Megan will know for the record is on her way, stuck in traffic. Make a motion to start the meeting.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, that we reconvene the 24-25 budget hearings with the Board of Education.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay. Opposed? Okay. We're back in recess, or back out of recess, I should say. Well, would you like to start?
I'll let our board chair start. Thank you.
For just a minute. You know, have you met our new cabinet?
Yes. Steve, I met last.
Sean, we have Jen and
Nice to meet
Liz
you.
here, and Wendy, and anybody else? So good evening to you all, and thank you for the opportunity to engage with you this evening in this dialogue. Our partnership is an important one, an important part of the budget process, and I appreciate that we're all here in person this year. It's been a while since we've actually presented to you in person, I think. As was covered in depth to you all during our meeting last year, budgeting in this post-pandemic era continues to be a challenge, and our request this year really should not come as a surprise. We're faced with the same effects of inflation, contractual obligations, specialized programming, and mandates, and these same issues are being felt in school districts across the state and the nation. And within that context, we seek to support as efficiently as possible the needs of students and staff so they will thrive within Milford Public Schools. So we believe a 21st century learning experience is integral to the success of our young people. This budget request emphasizes student voice and choice in their learning through new opportunities, such as the addition of American Sign Language as a middle school world language option and enhanced investments in technology. This budget also continues to support teacher agency with funding for appropriate professional learning opportunities to help them bring their best selves to the classroom every day. We need support for our infrastructure and safety and security measures with funding for equipment of their choice, whether it's continuing their education at a university or a technical school, entering the workforce. Every dollar in this budget is an investment in our community, and with your support, we can continue the progress and commitments made.
It's interesting that, Mr. Lima, let's see if I can do some clicking. And the sentiment of this slide is something of work for our young people. And so, generation of the budget, I put together actually a little bit of flashback on the next slide of, I took years, and I flipped through Board of Ed chair, I flipped through line by line items of requests for a budget, and I found more often than not commonalities of goals and achievement for our young people. And I pulled out some of that language for the last 10 years, and I just made a little list. You know, in 2005, they weren't talking about Milford measures or commitments and priorities. They were talking about performance promises, but yet the same sentiment. And 20 years ago, they were talking about graduation requirements and interdisciplinary skills and teacher evaluation, and I'm sorry to say we haven't gotten that right yet, even though it's been 20 years. And then in 2009, they were talking about safety and security and diverse and unique academic programs. Class sizes was on their list of discussion. 2012, they were talking about a rigorous and quality education, or today we call that high quality instruction, HQI. Something that we didn't originate, but actually building on the excellence that has been here. They were talking about family and community partnerships, computer leases in 2012. God knows what those looked like 11 years ago, right? They were probably big honkin' desktops, definitely not Chromebooks. The arts and athletics was important in 2012. 2014, the preschool was a priority. School security came up again. Special education support started becoming much more emphasized. Community conversations around what do we want high school graduates to look like, know, be able to do. And then 2017, the year before I got here in 2018, Topics in that budget included school climate, career pathways, business and world language labs, Chromebooks made the budget book for the first time, class size was on the list, and summer learning. So you'll see as we go through to review of the 24-25 proposed budget, as some of those themes continue on. That's the problem with me trying to talk to you and navigate. And that means we don't just look at, hey, we had 500,000 in that line. Would you like 500,001? No, we roll everybody back to zero, and we ask everyone to build a budget based on student and staff needs. It is primarily based on what the Board of Education identifies as the vision, the commitments, the mission, the goals of the district. We also base all of our decisions on 4 core documents, which you will see later on in this presentation, on the vision of the learner, high quality instruction, developmental relationships framework, and the equity framework. Based on that foundation, we ask staff members to take a look at the needs of the students in front of them, reflect on what they need to develop and grow, and then we take a look at what the programs and initiatives are going to be for the next year. And we ask ourselves then, what are the resources that we need in the form of a budget to support a quick overview of our process. Annually, our Board of Education adopts priorities and budget assumptions. I will not read the next 5 slides to you, but I will say in the area of priorities, what we always look at is what are we doing instructionally, what are we doing to support students holistically, looking at wellness and development, what's the professional learning that our staff members need. We take a look at the continuum of talent management, meaning how can we recruit and retain the very best talent out there, which I will tell you, in today's climate is becoming more and more difficult. The pipeline for teaching is drying up across the nation. So our talent management and development department is working overtime to ensure we get the very best teachers and can hold on to them. We are committed to our class sizes. In grades K2, a maximum of 20 students. In grades 3-5, a maximum of 23. We are committed to 21st century physical learning spaces, and as always, committed to extracurricular and athletics. Moving on to the budget assumptions, you will see a number of factors that we considered that are impacting. Now remember, these were adopted in October. It is almost March, so some of these numbers are moving and developing. A couple of highlights though is that the ARP ESSER funds are officially coming to a close. They must be completely expended by September 1st of 2024. We are anticipating that our enrollment is remaining pretty stable for the next 5 to 10 years. So we're counting on having about the same number of students as we have right now for the next few years. We also know that inflation is hitting us hard, and that is manifesting itself in the union contracts that we are closing out. It's also impacting hourly rate wages. Our health insurance plans are increasing at large double-digit numbers. Special education continues to grow as it is nationally, and we have seen that specific impact in tuition and transportation lines. Transportation increases on an annual basis at the approximate 3%. That is reflected in our contract. And well, you know what's going on with fuel prices. That's also hitting our budget as well. So we believe that shortage of natural gas supply is at a record high. Some of the inflation numbers are impacting our ability to attain resources and equipment. We have multiple mandates that came before you last year and are back here this year, like the HVAC system evaluation and the menstrual product dispensers. We, of course, support our safety and security measures. We try to find efficiencies in all our line items. And, of course, we have been dealing with the implementation of the new kindergarten start date and making accommodations to support Milford families for those families whose children fall between the birthdays of September 1st and December 31st of 2019. And I've already talked about the 4 cornerstone documents that support our budget. So I always like to give all of our boards a little bit of a snippet of how are we doing. And this is sort of the return on investment part of our presentation. So in 2023, we had 400 graduates at 3 different graduations. 168 of those graduates left us with honors. And 82% of those graduates have moved on to 4- and 2-year universities or colleges. 4% have moved on to tech or career education. 12% went straight into the work world, and 2 have joined the military. We're always very proud of our College Board accomplishments. 140 students were named AP Scholars. You see the breakdown there of scholars with honors and with distinction. We continue to offer a beautiful selection of AP courses as well as ECE courses or dual enrollment courses with other universities. Our intention is to continue to grow those opportunities for kids to get college credit while sitting in high school seats. So you'll see some of that expansion in our dialogue. So what have we been doing this year? Some small snapshots. We're extending our CNA courses. We've expanded our mathematics options and improved our curriculum. Invested in our music program. We've purchased robots for some of our elementary, middle, and high schools. Expanded classroom libraries. Continue to expand STEM experiences. And yes, we have new playgrounds, which our elementary kids are super excited about. We've expanded our literacy opportunities under new state mandate, aligning with the right to read, the science of reading, I'm sorry. We've purchased musical instruments. We've invested in engineering. We are now officially a pre-K through 12 world language district. We have a continuum of world language offerings starting with our preschoolers. So something for our city to be very, very proud of, because not many school districts in the state of Connecticut can state that. The last time I checked, which was like 3 years ago, I think there were only 9 districts offering that. I do not have an updated number on that, but please know it is a significant minority. And just to give you a scope of understanding of our facilities, we are responsible for 1.1 million square feet of building space. We take care of 179 acres of grounds, and across the district, we are responsible for the learning in 485 classrooms. So I always like to remind our city the scope of our responsibility. And on any given day, we're transporting a little over 4,000 kiddos and serving about 700,000 meals across the district. So something to be very proud of, that our operations side do that with great efficiency and success. So moving forward, proposal for the 24-25 school year, we are seeking from the city $111,285,770, which represents a 4.7% increase year over year. So let's break that down a little bit for you. There are 6 primary drivers that contributed to the 4.7% increase. Those are represented on the slide before you, but there are 3 slides in addition that we're going to take these one by one. So let's start with salaries and benefits. So as you are probably familiar, about 77% of our budget, 77% of $111 million is committed to salaries and benefits. Why is that? Because we are a human capital driven industry. If we were providing services and programs to young people, it is more likely that it will be done by hiring someone than buying a box in the form of a program. So we are a human capital driven industry. Education is, and on average, you're looking at around 70-75% of a school budget is made up of salaries and benefits, and you see here we're at 77%, so it's right there in the average. So 77% is in salaries and benefits. We're in the 2nd year of the teacher's contract, which amounts to about $1.8 million increase. in just the natural progression of a contract. And we are also looking at a net increase of 2.0 certified positions and 6.3 non-certified positions. That is further delineated on Roman numeral page 16 in your budget book, which we won't go to just yet, but I'm sure we will during this conversation. So let me help you understand that also in that FTE breakdown, that we are in our final year of moving 4.0 FTEs off of the ARPA grant onto the general fund. If you'll recall, those are school counselors. We made a commitment out loud to our public 3 years ago that we would intentionally build those FTEs into the grant and over the course of 3 years, move FTEs over. Hence, avoiding what many school districts are facing today, and that is a huge funding cliff. That was intentional leadership on our part. We intentionally baked in the FTEs 3 years ago, and we decided we would move them over year. So the impact that we are finally seeing is the last 4 positions coming over to the general fund. Please note that out of the 4.7% increase, in what I just covered, 2.96% is related to that increase. So the overall increase is 4.7. 2.96% represents the salaries and benefits that I just covered with you, okay? Let's move on to specialized programming. So we are seeing what many other communities are experiencing, and that is an increase of students for specialized need programming. And that is just a fact. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just that's the state of the condition of our young people right now. And that comes in the form of needing behavioral supports as well as academic supports. So about $500,000 of the increase includes the addition of a behavioral support program at the elementary level, which includes a certified teacher and 3 paraprofessionals and necessary resources. So who would that serve? Students that are demonstrating some level of dysregulation that would need additional supports outside of the regular classroom. So we would keep those kids here in district rather than outplacing them to give them the least restrictive environment to learn in. So these students would benefit from a specialized behavioral program. Similarly, some of our students are struggling academically, so significantly so, and these are students that have been identified with a specific disability through a PPT process. We will be adding a specialized support program at the elementary level. That would include the hiring of a teacher, 3 paraprofessionals, and then the necessary resources. Because our children across the district are experiencing such behavioral needs, we're also going to invest in adding a board-certified behavior specialist. We already have some on staff. We are needing more of those individuals. This type of staff member would work with multiple kids across multiple schools. They would see students, develop programming for them, and provide plans for teachers and other specialists to implement to better support our kids behaviorally. It is a common strategy across districts. We have some already, we just need more. And I'll be asking Ms. Stewart in a few minutes of how many of those we already have in the district and what that will make, but I just don't remember that off the top of my head. And then we're also seeking under this category additional clinical therapists. So you may have read in the paper or heard on social media that we are the benefactors of a grant that Bridges was awarded, a 5-year grant that allows us to have a clinical therapist at both West Shore and Law. We already have one in the academy. The clinical therapist works with very specialized cases, students, with the permission of families. Those individuals will work with families as well. These are clinical therapists that can be accessed at school during the day for very specific needs of young people that go well beyond what our school counselors, school psychologists, social workers. There's a specialized area of therapy, which if you need more information, I'm just giving Ms. Stewart another heads up that she can chime in and help us with that information as well, okay? So those clinical therapists, we are proposing to finish out, to have them at each middle school and each high school. So that would mean adding one at Harborside, East Shore, and Foreign. How many BCBAs do we have right now?
We have 3.6.
Thank you. I'm gonna be adding one, so making it 4.6. Okay,
What were you rating? I'm sorry.
BCBA,
BCBA.
the Board Certified Behavior Analyst. Okay, and finally, these primary drivers include an increase in special education services in the area of tuition, going up about $200,000, and contracted services, again, about $200,000. In transportation, transportation and fuel costs, pardon me, we're seeing an increase in regular education of about $170,000, and special ed about $126,000. If you haven't heard, great news, CIAC has approved summer coaching and training, which was not allowed at one time in the state of Connecticut. That would mean that our athletes can spend time with coaches and or athletic trainers, developing skill set and conditioning over the summer in preparation for their season. Of course, that's an option for us. But if you think about it, other districts will be participating in summer training and coaching. We certainly would not want our athletes to be put behind in a competitive nature. So we're anticipating that budget to be about $70,000 for summer training, conditioning, coaching. And finally, the last driver is in the area of school facilities. As Ms. Glennon pointed to, there have been oftentimes grounds maintenance and building projects put on hold because of trying to tighten the belt a bit. We also, because of the zero-based budgeting approach, there isn't what we at one time were accustomed to in redirecting end-of-year funds to supplement the grounds and building projects. At the end of the year, we're spending down to zero based on exactly what we had planned for. And sometimes, like this year, it's pretty tight because unexpected special ed costs. So that means there haven't been extra funds to go to grounds and building. And those line items have been either very tightly kept at their average or in some cases reduced. So that's why we're seeing a significant proposed increase in buildings at $723,000 and grounds maintenance at $558,000. We also have some capital equipment replacement for maintenance department that is sorely needed as well. So those three slides summarize the primary drivers on the increase. So moving forward, the system improvements are outlined by level here. I'm so glad Ms. Glennon mentioned American Sign Language, because I think that is just such an example of how our teams are thinking outside the box to give a unique experience for young people. Not every school system can say they're offering ASL at middle school. In fact, we're looking to continue to grow the world language program and give even more choices to our young people. You'll see some of the examples here. I won't read them all to you. I'll just talk about the ones I'm most excited about. World language being one. Tech Ed 3D printers are going to officially be included in the middle school curriculum as an option for kids to take. Mr. Arteri, it's pre-engineering and manufacturing.
Engineering, design, and manufacturing.
Thank you. Engineering, design, and manufacturing will be one of the electives at the middle school. Now you can imagine how that can start to spark some great career thinking for our young children as early as, I think it's going to start in 7th grade, right?
7th grade, 8th grade. Yeah.
Right. Certainly, we are investing in more materials and text to support our new curriculum. You'll see there various world language, social studies, medical mystery, statistics, calculus, software for personal finance, text for AP courses, lots of great materials supporting the curriculum. We are also going to start replacing the the foreign band uniforms. I think, if my memory serves me right, they're 20-plus years old. While they look good for 20-year-old white uniforms, must be good laundry detergent we're using, it's time to make a change. We upgraded laws 3 or 4 years ago, if I recall correctly.
2020.
Thank you. And so it's time to help Foreign's band do the same. We have, hopefully, fingers crossed, a new esports team starting next year. Is officially a CIAC recognized sport. We are about to launch, I think in March, an esports club which is in response, if I can say so, our kids asked for this. So I love that we have a school system that responds to our student needs and interests. So we're hoping to officially kick off a team next year. A club starting this year and a competitive team, at least one team for the district, if not two, a law and a foreign. We'll see how things go. And one other thing I'd like to highlight, we are going to engage in a teacher in residency program. Once again, we hit pause this year because we had to reevaluate the program and our own contribution to the program. But this is an effort to better diversify our teaching staff. So it is a program specifically with the focus of recruiting teachers of color. We just did a presentation on Monday. Our representation of teachers of color is significantly below what our young people, the representation of our population is in our classrooms. So we're trying to close the gap and increase the number of teachers of color that we hire. This is a long list of the revised curriculum implementation schedule for next year that is supported by the proposed budget. I won't read that list to you. Then we, of course, look for savings. These are some line items that we were able to find some efficiencies in order to offset the increase moving forward. We'd like to give you a historical perspective of superintendent proposed and final adopted budgets. This just gives you a historical view of where budgets have been. I will say, while Ms. Glennon hinted at it, I would, if you scan the headlines of Connecticut towns, you'll see that a majority of towns are at some very high percentages this year. I sometimes see, wow, ours is kind of on the lower side of some of the increases, even though it may not feel like it at this table. I do recognize that, but I just want to call out that the state of Connecticut is experiencing impact of inflation at school districts. The pie chart just gives you a visual breakdown of where all our increases are. So depending on the type of learner you are, you might like it in this version or the next slide, which gives you the same information but broken down in a chart. Okay? And just want to end things out by saying that we are committed. All of our budget processes, as well as our decision making on what we're purchasing, what we're asking kids to do and teachers to do, is based on the 4 cornerstone documents that drive everything we do in the district. So at this point, I'm happy to our team is happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Very helpful and well presented. I appreciate all of the information. And as you know, historically, we used to do a page turner through the book. I think we moved away from that a year or two ago. So unless board members would like to present it that way or approach it that way, I think what I do instead is simply open up the floor to members of the board who may have any questions or comments for the superintendent, chairperson, or any members of the administration. Well, just to get things started, you did mention a few times deferred projects, deferred capital projects or maintenance projects. Can you give an example or two of what projects you're referring to?
Yes.
Well, he was looking at you.
Well, I was looking at, she was the first to mention it,
Yeah,
so.
I'm generally
So she,
cameras and
she
things like
put
that, there's
the-
security and there's, some, computer, yes.
We'll take it.
Yes.
We'll take it, thank you. Just an example, I don't need a complete list, but just to get a sense of what we're.
Mr. Brennan, can you give some examples?
Thank you.
Sure, so some of the building projects by school, so what we do is we create like a list of needs based on schools, and each school has their own prioritization list. And then what we typically do in building and ground projects is try to tackle the top two, one or two of those projects in there. So some buildings projects that we have is abatement, replacement of floors, ceiling classrooms, ceilings in the classrooms, painting, more abatement. I can give you like more specific.
Well, that's sort of been the approach though for years though, isn't it?
Yes.
Each principal or person would submit their list of what they would like, the wish list, so to speak, and then you would prioritize what could be
Yes,
done or
yeah,
what
so it's a
was
collaboration between the building administration and also Pat Bradbury and the facilities department and central office administration. And that list is ongoing, and it's a list that goes down each year. Like we mentioned, end of the year fund was something that we utilized in the past to help offset some of those projects that were happening. In the past few years, we haven't had that end of the year money, so now what we're doing is intentionally budgeting for some of those projects.
Okay.
The list that Mr. Bradbury has provided to us, I think it was 8.9 million as a total, dollar amount here. 8.7 million approximately for his building projects is what he's listing as the total amount there. Now, in this budget, we haven't accounted for all 8.7 million of that. Those are just the items that are listed on his buildings projects list. And I just want to really emphasize that 8.7 doesn't even, it's not an exhaustive list that lists everything we possibly have.
Right.
So that's just, those are like our top needs that we're trying to approach there. And based upon school, that's really, dependent upon what the needs are. So for instance, Cap 10, we have abatement of 4 classrooms in there, replacing bathrooms in Orange Ave. So some of the bathrooms need to be upgraded and replaced based on needs and how old they are. So I can go school by school if you're asking me.
No, that's helpful, I just, so, and if I'm reading the budget correctly, then you've got a total, if your list is roughly 8 million, you've got a budget this year of approximately 743,000 for building projects?
That is correct.
Roughly 10%?
That's correct,
More or
yeah.
less.
So if that 8.7 million plus or minus represents our more immediate needs, what we're budgeting for is that 723,000 of that. And some of those items that I've listed are those actual specific projects within each building. So it's
Okay.
approximately 1 project per building.
And you just mentioned abatement, but are we still doing tile abatement, or the asbestos abatement in the schools? I thought we were.
We've been doing that for years.
I know.
Yeah, we still do have
There's still asbestos tile?
Yes, and it's not solely asbestos tile. There's other parts of the building that would have asbestos in it as well. Possibly something that wraps a pipe like so some of these items, so I don't know that we could say that we would ever be 100% asbestos removed because some of these pipes in the walls may have a covering on them that has asbestos on it. So when we were doing abatement, we'd have to test in that area. But yes, some of them are floor tiles.
Because I know for years we were bonding, probably a decade, we were bonding for tile removal.
Yes, it is something that we've aggressively attacked over the years, but to say that we are completely asbestos-free is not accurate.
Well, I think if you think about the origination age of most of our buildings, they were built at a time where these materials were widely used. So when we're dealing with buildings that started in 1950 to 70, we're going to be bumping into that for a long time, right? Specifically last year, you used the word deferred, so I think that you could look at that word 2 different ways. So we specifically put off 2 projects, and that is security cameras and some computer servers. So part of the process, it's interesting you use the word defer because even though we have a prioritized list, which is not exhaustive, the conversation at our table often goes like this. How much longer can you keep that boiler running?
Right.
Right? Like that's sometimes down to the nitty gritty to Pat Bradbury. Do we have another year out of that, Pat, or do we have to budget for it now, right? So, in security camera world, this comes up a lot in our conversation. So those cameras are working, but they were purchased 15 years ago. Technology changes 6 months. So are they highly effective, medium effective, low effective? So the word deferral and when we're building a budget is just like that, Mr. Lemos. I just want you to realize that there are projects put on the table, and the questions we're asking is there any more life out of it that we can get? And sometimes we're deferring that another year because Pat's like, yeah, I can get another year out of that.
Right.
You know, and it's sort of rolling the dice sometimes, right? Like just like at home, you're crossing every body part to make sure that the big ticket item doesn't go. So when you have aging buildings and you have a list that doesn't cover everything and it's $8 million, some of the deferral conversation sounds like that, okay?
Understood, thank you for the follow-up.
How much of the 8 million would you attribute to like Harborside? Like if you had a wish list, how much of that is towards Harborside?
We don't have a wish list on Harborside, we have just so this is not comprehensive.
Not comprehensive, based on the amounts that we have on this list, broken out of that 8.7 million. It is identified about approximately 498,000 of that to Harborside's projects. And like, just to reiterate, those are not an exhaustive list of items that need to be completed. That's
like
just,
low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
And not necessarily the low-hanging, those are like more priority pieces. So like, I would say this 8.7 million represents priority projects. Not being able to complete all 8.7 million of that in any given 1 year, what we do is we prioritize those projects. So all of those, I wouldn't classify as like wish list items. I would say that those are needs of the buildings, but what we do is we prioritize by the top list. And what guides our decision-making there is life safety type items, things that need for code compliance and other items along that way.
More easily identifiable.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You mentioned security. Roman numeral 11, security services. I see a decline of 79%.
I think that's something different. What page is that?
Roman numeral 11. It's
So that could also be contracted maintenance in there as well. So
security services.
yeah, so security services entails not just the addition of like safety and security, it could also be building security, so it could be contracted services in there as well too.
Contracted services is actually listed there. It's down 12%.
Yes.
And then security services is down 7%. That's under contracted services. Would that be security guards or what?
No, it wouldn't be security guards. Which page? Roman numeral
11.
11?
Under contracted services.
Lewis is looking it up,
3305.
exactly what it is.
I'm just curious because, like we mentioned, we want to add security, and obviously in today's day and age, you can't be too safe.
Right.
Why there would be a decrease in that?
Right, so that line, that could be contracted maintenance as well too. So I know we switched over to the new alertus system, which would fall under there, which is a contracted service that we have to maintain, safety and security within the schools. So it could be a savings accrued within that line item.
So due to technology, you could be witnessing a savings on
Yes.
some of the services we subscribe to.
Mr. Arnold, you have a
Well, jump a little bit. With the 8.7 million, I mean, we just approved a bond for 5.5, and I know that was a project. Why wouldn't you bond for the 8.7 and just address it over 10 years?
So when you bond for a project like that, you go through a process of an identified actual specific project.
Uh-huh.
So for each one of those projects, you would have to go out to bid for in like a capital improvement plan like that. It typically doesn't cover a plethora of items. So typically what you do is you allot a specific item to one specific project.
Mhm.
So if you look cumulatively across 8.7, you could technically have hundreds of contractors that would be bidding on each individual project of that at one time. So the capital improvement plan is typically when you're identifying those larger projects,
Mhm.
and then you're going through that bidding process for that. So it would be,
And you would have to go outside for that, you couldn't, estimate and come up with an internal quote and say, okay, we're gonna bond, this project's $250,000, slated, again, over 10 years.
Well, historically, I think you typically bonded projects where you could get eligible for state reimbursement on a large scale. And I get the sense a lot of these projects range from minor to,
Mhm.
somewhat larger, but not necessarily a capital project.
So I'll give you an example, Mr. Arnold. Right, so we're gonna multitask, everybody can keep up here. So in 3305, in 23-24, we had a one-time purchase of the Alertus system by upgrading the outdoor public address systems at various schools. So that was a one-time project that got that installed, so that project came off for 24-25.
so the saving would be
That's the
not
savings.
waiting to purchase that contracted
In
Alertus program
3305,
Yeah. What year was that? I'm sorry.
last year.
last year.
That's the
So-
zero waste budgeting.
Yeah. But then you go back 2022, 23, 2021, 2022.
But you may have
But-
examples of that year after year, so we're making one-time purchase, it comes off, make one-time purchase, it comes off, right?
Yeah, it comes down significantly from 21, 22. Yeah, no, I was wondering, because obviously security is top of everybody's mind, and I would put it at the top of everybody's mind.
Absolutely.
And I was just curious, I noted that when I was looking at this as a first run, like I would just expect to see everything security related increase.
Increase, yeah.
I guess I didn't put.
We'll be
much
happy
thought
to
into
come
how-
through with that next year.
Listen, I got 4 kids in the school, so I'd be happy to pay extra taxes to have higher
Well,
security.
Mr. Melton, with all much more seriousness, we just presented to the board on Monday night our annual update on safety security. And, we're very proud of the high level, or oftentimes that night we said we're ahead of the curve, ahead of the curve. We realize though, if we don't continue to make improvements, we won't be ahead of the curve. So we anticipate, we pitched to the board that we engage in a renewal of our security systems and take a look at what are the next steps. So in all seriousness, we'll likely be coming forward with a multi-year plan on what's next in the area of security. Of course, we'll work with the police department, the mayor's office, our Board of Education to vision that. So a couple examples, Mr. Arnold, of projects that you really wouldn't bond for is like adding cabinets to classrooms. That's $4 grand, right? You're not gonna bond for that.
Fire panel upgrade at Foreign High School.
$10,000 for chemical control and acid systems added for the pool. Replacing classroom window blinds, insulating chiller lines, adding dehumidification for a kiln room, 2,500. So these are like little projects like around your house, right? Yeah,
8.7 million.
right.
Yeah,
I got a million square feet, right? So,
1.1.
and that's not even exhaustive of all of them.
right.
It's just.
I did have a question. Does that include vehicles or any of that, or is that just building projects?
That's just building projects. So vehicles would count as the capital item expenditures that we put onto the budget. So when we purchase a vehicle, that would go on capital equipment.
Capital equipment, not. Okay. I didn't think so, but it's just.
Well, we're just on the air, a couple of detail questions. The classroom painting, how many classrooms for 100 grand?
Exactly.
Well, within plus or minus 10%.
Well, have you tried to buy a gallon of paint?
I live in a paint.
I know that, like, it's anywhere from $60 to $80,
So-
I buy a lot of paint.
Let me put it this way. For us, when we look at the painting of the classrooms,
Yeah.
typically what we do is we do have an in-house painter that would paint a lot of the smaller areas. But when we look at a larger space, like a media center, a gymnasium, for our own crew to do that, the 1 to 2 people that we have on our crew, it would take them so long to get the scaffolding set up and do something like that. So when you see the amount on there for 100,000, that's typically for us to go out and hire a painting company to cover a large space, like maybe a whole hallway or gymnasium or a media center. So typically those smaller classroom areas, we're able to handle those in-house, but we may, depending upon the number of them, so if it's one classroom in a hallway, we can approach that. If it's a whole wing of a hallway, then we would go out to have a contractor come in and they would go right through it very quickly.
So you have enough significant, like the size is significant enough.
Yes.
And how many of those?
I can get you specific, off the top of my head, I don't have
Okay,
what
that'd be
100
fine.
grand would specifically cover, but those would typically
3,
be,
4, 10?
We'll get back to you
yeah,
on
we can
that.
get back to you on the actual specific.
And then just again, nitty gritty, you got cameras. What is the difference? We got one that's $7,000 and 50 that are 1,200.
Where are you referring?
The next page, 822.
And 82.
Well, that's a special camera.
All right.
So the camera that we have to put at the high school? The pool, yeah. So, you go for it.
I can speak to
Yeah.
that one. So that specific camera, because of the location of it, it is a need to have one out in that area, but because of the distance from where the line would need to be run, so part of it is the camera itself, but it's also the line that would need to be run out to that spot, which, going through ceiling tiles all the way out to that specific location is really the bulk of what that costs. So it's not necessarily a more expensive camera, it's more about what it would take to get the wires out to that location. Because it's a secluded area, if you're familiar with where the pool hall is at Florence High School, and to run those lines back to the main box is really what the bulk of that purchase is.
And it has to be wired as opposed to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that's my understanding
Just
of it.
speed and the amount of data that goes through it.
Yeah, when it's running
I mean,
constant.
there's not really Wi-Fi out there anyway, because of
Mhm.
the location that it's in, so there's no good internet out there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
We talk about the state mandate for the HVAC, menstrual product dispensers in every bathroom, male, female, is that the,
No, not every.
no?
It's one.
At least one in 3 through 5 bathrooms of both genders.
Yes. And
Every bathroom in middle and high.
I believe so, yeah, you have to provide access to it.
Understood. So that was budgeted last year, we didn't need to use that money. It's now,
We took it out of the budget last year.
we took it out.
Yeah, because the mandate was.
That was
the-
Well, we found out before the budget was
Yeah,
passed.
so the implementation date was pushed back.
Gotcha, okay. Then how much, and I just forget because we talked about this last year. With the HVAC, we can't use any of the money from COVID. Wasn't a lot of that money designated specifically for ventilation?
Yes, so-
Improvement of,
With an update to this, when we wrote the budget assumptions, this was earlier in the year, so since then, we've gone out to bid, we selected a firm, and we are able to use ARP money to cover the majority of that. The variable piece of that, though, is what kind of items are found from the actual assessment. So we have a firm that is hired to conduct testing and balancing on all of our HVAC systems. And as a result of that, there will come with recommendations for things that need to be addressed, which is really the variable wild card that we'd have to try to anticipate. So after this firm conducts their complete assessment of all of our systems, of all of our schools, at that point, we now need to address the things that are of a high priority, very similar to what we would have on our capital items list. So we're expecting that we would have a number of items that we would have to look at from there.
so we were able to use some of the ARP money for that HVAC?
Yes,
Testing of
for the
state
actual
requirements.
state assessment,
State
yes.
mandate, yeah. But I'm hearing you, we don't know what comes up the assessment, could be another X amount of dollars.
I don't even wanna guess.
Yeah, yeah. But wasn't there more money, like, how much money's left in that ARP specifically for ventilation and HVAC?
So I wouldn't say that it was all necessarily called out for HVAC. There's there's a number of requirements that you can have within the ARP grant. So the amount that we called out specific to this project is $300,000. The remaining ARP funds are all accounted for various items. There's a whole list of items that, based on the requirements of the actual ARP grant, that you could use that for. So the part that's specifically called out for this HVAC assessment is just under 300,000, 299,500, something like that.
So that's not, that 300,000 plus or minus isn't,
We're not
we're not
accounting for it.
accounting for it here because it's paid for, essentially. Thank you.
Well,
How would, of the 8.7 million, just to get back to what we were talking about earlier, can we use any of the ARP or any kind of like funds to knock out some of these, I don't want to call them smaller projects, they're all big, I guess, right? But can we use any ARP money for any of that stuff?
Yeah, I think when you think about the very specific requirements of what the ARP grant is asking you to do, I don't know that at this point we'd be able to call any of those funds. And in order to complete that, the funds need to be expended by September 30th. So it would, if we're looking at some of these larger projects, by the time you go out to bid for them, and then by the time you complete the work and have the money expended, I would be concerned with that timeline a little bit.
They all have to meet very specific criteria, which most of the time have to do with air quality.
Yeah, and we have to, write a narrative for that and get that approved. And the air quality one is the one that we were able to actually get on the grant.
Sure. Thank you.
Anyone else? I just have another follow-up. You had mentioned with the movement of the counselors from the grant to FTE under the current budget. I just wasn't sure if I understood it correctly. Is this the last year of that? It is last year. Okay.
24, 25 in the last year, that we're getting a big number, yeah.
Are there any other similar situations with employees under grant that we anticipate moving onto the budget next year? No. Okay.
I mean, unless the federal government decides not to give us,
Well, there's a
title
lot,
I
I know you depend on a lot of grants for a
We
lot
have
of things.
grants, but.
But this was sort of a limited time.
Correct,
you know,
yeah, we were very intentional about that.
Yes.
Only if there were significant changes to our entitlement grants that we have staff.
Because as you mentioned in your introduction, 80% of your budget is personnel and people. So it's a big driver of costs, obviously. Which is always a concern, like you had mentioned, the Bridges grant for the clinical therapist. Is that something that you think 5 years from now that you're going to try to continue? I know it's hard to project that long in the distance, but at some point that grant will run out. And then is the current thinking in education that that's the type of services you would be providing to pupils on an ongoing basis? That's kind of...
Well, hence our signaling that we want to add them to the other two middle and high schools. So I would answer directly, yes, that would be likely a growing need. And so, with my current crystal ball, I would say yes,
Right.
the need would still be there. But if at any time our students are not in need of more specialized clinical support, then we would remove those clinical therapists. These therapists actually don't become our employees. They are contracted through Bridges. So it's a contracted amount as opposed to a salary amount.
So they're not currently employees, they're just...
They work for Bridges.
They work for Bridges.
So in 5 years, we would see that under contracted services if, in fact, it was determined that they needed to be.
Are they under contracted services now in the proposed budget?
Yes.
God forbid I'm still on this board 5 years from now. If they come over to FTE, I'll know.
If your memory serves you well, then.
At 85 years old, I remember when. My favorite topic, enrollment.
Mine too.
Yes. I have a question. On page, Roman numeral 17, with the enrollment projections. There's 2 asterisks, and I'm just not quite sure if I understand the meaning of those asterisks.
Sure, I'm happy to explain. So the 387 are the students that we anticipate would be coming if there was no change in legislation.
For
kindergarten.
Yes. Okay.
Refresh my memory, what's the change again? They're opening up
The start date has been moved from, so at one time it was, you have to be 5 by December 31st of that year. Now it is, you have to be 5 by September 1st of that year. So that completely cuts out any child born between September 2nd and December 31st. So it could mean a third of our kids wouldn't be able to come.
For the coming year.
So caveat, the legislator allows a waiver. So parents could say, hey, my kid was born October 1st, but I think he's ready, so we must administer an assessment. So we've had a number of children, family request an assessment. If you give me a minute, I can bring up the numbers. Most of the children have received a waiver.
73, 63 granted the waiver.
Thank you. 73 applied for a waiver, 63 have been granted a waiver. How many students have officially registered for kindergarten? You have that number? Get that for you. In the meantime, Mr. Moulton, you may have heard that as an offering to the community of Milford, we have decided for 1 year to open up preschool seats to those children who fall between those dates, who did not get a waiver or whose parents are not interested in requesting a waiver. And we're offering those at reduced tuition rates. So we will be adding at least 1 to 2 preschool rooms. I'm thinking right now we're in the 2 range, but I also know that not every parent has come out to register their kid, despite our best efforts to get the word out. So we've had 2 registration cycles, or 2 waiver assessment cycles, and we're planning to hold another in April.
So despite, quote unquote, losing kindergartners, we're gonna pick them back up theoretically in pre-K, so we're not
Or
necessarily.
waiver.
Yeah, so we're not necessarily net negative in new students as a result, so we're basically kind of.
Not necessarily. That's why our strategy was to budget for the full 387.
Yeah.
Because
Because we're gonna pick them up.
we
in
thought
pre-K anyway.
we would have them in another way, whether it was through waiver or in preschool. And, you know, it's worth talking about as a city, and this would be the appropriate table to do that. And, you know, I think if you were just to read the tea leaves of the state, that they are looking toward opening up more preschool seats across the state. So I don't think that the state, if my hunch is right, would ever go to universal pre-K. Because I don't know that as a state we believe that's the right thing for every kid. But I think more preschool seats is likely in our future as a school district by expanding preschool. And not necessarily for free, but for reduced costs. Because I remember working with former Mayor Smith, and he doing his homework in the area of preschool, identifying that there were a lot of families needing more preschool seats. So I think the public school system could play a role in helping with that. So if you're here in 5 years, Mr. Lima, we'll probably be talking about that,
Yes.
okay?
Well, I mean, it's a challenge statewide, and I think it's interesting if the state would do that, because certainly in the lower income areas, you know, they're affected even more than the affluent areas, because those families can't afford the pre-K services or the K services. So I'm surprised surprised that the state would go that route. From
The number of
understanding that, I think-
preschool classes, slot seats is way down in the state right now.
How many kindergartners?
280, and that's an increase of 17 since the beginning of February.
So the new cutoff date is effective this academic year or next, right?
It is, yeah.
But it may not take effect. Is that,
I don't
Is that what they're
I don't think they're
talking
gonna,
I don't know.
I don't think they're
Maybe I
gonna change
misheard.
that. I know
Think
there's
they'll-
talk of it, I don't see at this point that they'll change it.
The
Well, they
change-
might phase it in, there's been talk of phasing it in somehow, the change is definitely gonna happen, but I think they may, there's been talk of phasing it in rather than having it be.
It seems counterintuitive to me that if you want to get children into the preschool or school experience, then why cut off?
Because
Increase the cut-
kids are more ready, well,
They're not
changing
ready.
the cutoff date because when they're actually 5 years old, they're more ready for kindergarten than if they're. Yeah. So that's the rationale, and Connecticut was only one of, I think, 5 states across the country that still had a December 31st entry date, so. the majority
Because our
states-
kids are smarter than the rest of them.
But the challenge for our city, though, if we're gonna look at it as a community, we have 4-year-olds possibly not having an engaging experience for 4 months.
Right,
Or
that's-
more, like for another year.
That's what I
Uh,
meant,
So I feel like this is a city dialogue around what can the school system with city partners do to expand our preschool slots here for our young people, particularly since a third of them have just been told they can't come to kindergarten next year, right? And, part of legislative changes proposed is it not only phasing it in, but also removing the waiver altogether. So we wouldn't be saying yes to 63 families, we'd be saying no to more families moving forward. So I think it's a community by community challenge, and I think the school system, I know the school system will play a role in that solution in the coming years.
If we looked at enrollments 10 years ago, speaking about challenges, I mean, we're down about 1,000 students compared to about 10 years ago. And that trend, like you shared earlier, and I know there were some reports last year that anticipate that, all right, it'll hold somewhat steady, we may see a little bit of an increase of about 1%, give or take. It's hard to predict out much past 5 years. With Milford's stable housing market, it's likely that you're gonna see basically the same or just a continuation of the slow decline. I mean, how do we address that component of the whole budget? If we're off 20% in our student count from, let's say, 10 years ago, but we're carrying a budget that's 15%, 20% higher than it was 10 years ago, and we have schools at 60, 70% capacity, like how do we,
Good thing not that low.
70% capacity, 80% capacity?
So what level are you
We could
talking
get,
about?
well, I'm just talking very broad speaking across the whole,
So that's the
all
next
schools.
conversation of the school board is, how do we address that? I mean, so we had the facility study done. I mean, we're not, just because that was done doesn't mean we're gonna stop talking about it. That's the next phase is, what steps will we take next? So the next piece that we're going to address is to look at the actual, assess the actual bones of our buildings and, what shape are they really in? And move on from there and come up with some kind of a long-term, assessment of what might we be doing. So you have to remember also, just because enrollment has gone down, the use of the way the buildings are being used right now are drastically different than they were 10 years ago. So that makes a very big difference in, the capacity of the schools and how they're being utilized. The percentage of the capacity, the
But they
percentage of
would
utilization.
only focus on the physical facilities.
We're not just focusing on.
Okay,
physical.
what are some of the other things? that you're
Well, I
looking
mean,
at?
we're looking, the things that we've been talking about, the career pathways, the programmatic pieces. What do we need to do long-term in the future, programmatically, to be able to address 21st century needs of kids? So it's a conversation that we have to start to have. I mean, it's not something we're gonna come up with overnight, so.
No, it's a hard discussion. I mean, we, the school systems these facilities that was designed in the 50s and 60s.
Exactly.
Located throughout town in that time period, and we're still living with it, so.
So, Mr. Moulton, I think that's on the mind of many people, what you just mentioned, and I think the board is taking the necessary steps to come up with more concrete answers. But I think there are a couple of things to think about when it comes to enrollment has gone down significantly, and our budget is increasing. Like, that's just what's on people's
And
minds.
start taking up, by the way, that's not exclusive to Milford. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
statewide challenge, so it's
Yes.
not like, you know, hey, we got a new mayor and everybody wants to leave Milford. It's, you know, it's a
Whoa,
real
whoa,
challenge.
whoa,
I said it's not like that. But it's a real challenge throughout the state. I mean, you're seeing less and less people staying in Connecticut.
So a couple things, if you don't mind me sharing. I think the way we use our buildings today is significantly different than we did at one time. That's worth, I remember standing, actually, the USonic being over here and standing and presenting to this board pictures of what our classrooms used to look like and what they look now. I actually went to Live Oaks, took pictures of classrooms there. I think Cap Penn was in there, JFK may have been there, right? Like, the way we cut up classrooms right now for reading resource rooms, a school psychologist is in a converted closet. I mean, we're doing a really good job based on our consultant's analysis at some elementary schools and how we're using the space, considering the specialized programming we put in place. Some other schools have more wiggle room, if you take a look at the report, and I'm happy to send that report to you all if you'd like.
I actually
Please.
would, yeah, I would
Yep.
be.
Happy to send that. In fact, the consultant, in presenting to the board, commended the school district for taking advantage of the space that has come available, particularly at the secondary schools, by providing more electives and voice and choice. Instead of being tempted to shut things down or give away portions of buildings, what we're doing is we're expanding programming for kids. And so whenever we talk about facilities with this in our community, I want us to also finish the sentence and say, we're gonna talk about facilities and programming. Because we can't think that our schools are running, Mr. Lima, like when you and I were in school, right? They don't look the same, even though we have the same building. So our conversation as a community, if we could flip it, is what's the programming we want for our future children? In 5 to 10 years, let's focus on what's the future programming and then answer the question, what are the facilities we need for that? That is a flipped question that I would propose we enter into the dialogue with. And the board will do its due diligence. We're doing a full, how are we using our buildings, what does enrollment look like, and what's the plumbing look like? What's the HVAC look like? What's the foundation look like? Like we're engaging in that analysis right now. And on the other side of that, I hope to sit in front of you this time next year, Ms. Glennon, with at least a solid draft, right, Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Like, I'm gonna call it a solid draft
Yes.
of a long-range plan that will take a look at what are we doing with our buildings over the next 10 years. And how are we gonna program for kids, and what are the facilities that will support it? That's the plan. So I'm hoping that we can have a richer dialogue in the future.
The thing is, there needs to be a third component, the cost associated
Yep.
with the enhanced
It will be there.
programs. And
It's part
that's
of it.
really what's gonna rub. That's gonna be the challenge. To close a school, there's a lot of hidden costs, so that's not wise. But the reality is that, oh, if you have space, we can do this. Yes, but there's costs associated with it that often get lost. And it's our job to say, hey, wait a minute,
Yep,
there are costs. And that would be the third part of that plan.
it's in the plan.
Okay,
Yep.
excellent.
So we'll all do our jobs, right? My job is to vision and program for the future.
And you're doing a hell of a job. You really are.
Thank you. Don't get that often, but, so, and I.
Meeting adjourned.
But I will say that, we'd like to do that in partnership with you, right? in partnership with the Board of Ed, in partnership with the town bodies, in partnership with our parents, like, what are we dreaming for our kids and how do we want to budget for it? And it's not gonna be zero, Mr. Arnold, you know that, we're not gonna come in with a plan saying, we got everything we need, thank you, right? Like, and I'm gonna propose that we not just consider we're closing schools, but we might be building stuff. Like, we should really be thinking that we might
Well, why
want
don't you expand it? Wasn't that
we
the
might
bond that
want
was approved?
21st century spaces that represent, don't say that out loud. I'm sorry.
Wow. Makes a lot of sense.
Nobody heard that. But I think we should not, like, we're always defaulting to, are we closing schools, are we closing schools? And maybe we should be saying, what's the programming and what are we building? And I know that may sound like heresy here, but
No, but, you know, from just numbers perspective, you know, talking about closing schools, I mean, when you're down 1,000 students, and that trend is even more dramatic if you go out further, and you're,
well, actually, it's not.
Well, when you look at the facility study, because this is my take on it, 10 years out, based on the way we're using our buildings now with the projected middle line of enrollment, you know, they gave a high, middle, and low. Middle line of enrollment in 10 years, if we closed a school, we wouldn't have room, right? If we closed a school now. So,
And there are some districts that are dealing with that. They close schools and now they're stuck into a position where, oh no, we have more students, what do we need to do now? And it resulted in actually building.
and it's because of the way we're using the buildings. So that's the piece that is so different.
Well, I'm
than the
very,
way it was 10 years ago.
sorry, I'm very glad to hear that that's in the works, because I know it's been sort of dancing around for a couple of years, and we did one.
We did one 10 years
10
ago,
years
so
ago.
it's, you know,
So-
and we're now, I mean, 10 years ago, there were pieces of programming that were specific to that long-range plan that we're now pretty much done with, or, I mean, the career pathways was the last piece that we are, you know, it was to expand career pathways on the 6-12 continuum was part of that long-range plan. And that's really what we're talking about now, world language, science, you know, the science labs, those were part of that. Preschool, offerings that were more decentralized across the town rather than in one or two schools. Those were all the things that were on that plan from 10 years ago that have been finished at this point, so the time is right.
Do you think that the drop in enrollment is just demographics, people are moving out? Or do you have competition? Oh, I'm going to Hopkins, I'm going to, so it's really just demographics?
Absolutely, 100%.
There's families having one kid as opposed to.
Gotcha.
And families are living in Connecticut,
Yeah, and the flight. Although I think they're all coming back.
yeah? Okay.
Because of the new mayor.
We can move on to a different topic, but I did have that, my other asterisk question was, some students in these tolls are in specialized programs. Are those the ones in the magnet schools, the or that is just
Uh,
a reference to?
So they are children that may spend part of their time in a specialized class in the school
In the
and
school.
part of their time in a regular class. So we are
Okay.
just making sure that we're not like double counting kids, but
Okay, I wasn't sure.
it's
if
really
that
for
was-
like internal purposes, that asterisk, but.
But they're within our
Yeah.
system, so to speak, and
Yes,
not tuition somewhere else.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
specialized class meaning special ed of some
Special ed, yeah.
way, shape, or form.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen a big uptick over the years is how many students would qualify for special ed, PPT or,
When I first started in Connecticut in 2003, the prevalency rate was about like 10-11%. I think today we're at 17% in the state.
How many-
Milford's like at 22.
Sorry?
Okay. And Milford's at 22 based upon what's in here.
No, we're at
No.
17, right?
We're at 16.3.
percent of
Okay.
students require some sort of
Yeah.
special.
Percentages, okay.
Right.
But the dollars are like 22%.
Yeah, that's pretty average across the state. And it's worth stating that because we have the space, we can include specialized programming. And we were just talking about, it does save money instead of sending a child out to tuition spot. And if we are serious about expanding preschool seats, we're gonna need a room for that, so.
Lori, you quiet tonight?
Well, great presentation. Happy to see savings as always. You guys kind of covered the big hot topics.
Could I have a light question? What is Milford Measures? What is that?
I'm looking at Steve, look at me, you wanna take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. So, over the last couple of years, even prior to my arrival in the district, a lot of districts approach assessment as how students are performing on state summative assessments, SBAC, NGSS, the SAT. We really wanted to make sure that in district, we are looking at assessment in a more holistic manner. So, thinking about the engagement of our students in the classroom, how they're experiencing instruction, how our staff are looking at the work that they're doing around professional learning. So we wanted to build a measurement tool, a process for us to be able to look at multiple pieces of data and really get a holistic representation about how our students are experiencing the education that they have within Milford. So it wasn't relying solely on a summative assessment data point that's given at the end of the year. Really can't do anything in that current school year with. It's great to think about large-scale programmatic or curricular modification, but to really change the experience for students, this is work that we're doing throughout the year. We meet every other week right now to do that work, so.
And are you now fully using it, or are you still developing it?
Yeah, so it's a system that's in place, and the wonderful thing about it is we're continuously thinking about how we can use the system to get data that we need to determine the impact for not only staff but students as well. So right now we're doing some work around student learning experiences in the classroom and doing some quick surveys with students to get some of that data and think about how we would share it with district leaders, school leaders, but also classroom teachers as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Got a lot of sticky notes there.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And I had a question, we're not going page by page this year, but in the salary section, page 1, and then on page 2, the teacher's regular ed. So I see there's one additional staff person in central admin. Is there a particular position?
Nope, so let's take you back to page Roman numeral 16, please.
Okay, did I miss something?
You guys remember this guy named James Riccitelli, right?
Yes.
Remember that guy? Yeah, heard of him? So if you take a look at the right side of the page under 1120, his title is Chief Operations Officer because in the state of Connecticut, you can't be called an assistant superintendent unless you have the appropriate teaching certification.
Right.
So he always, and had to be, his salary had to come out of the non-administrator lines.
Okay.
So he, if you take a look at the 1120 account, that has been reduced by 1.0.
Right.
And then Mr. Brennan is a certified educator and has the title Assistant Superintendent, which is synonymous with Chief Operating Officer. So you'll see a decrease in 1120, but an increase in 1110. So no additional positions, just a shifting of accounting. Yeah.
And then on page 2, thank you, that's very helpful. On page 2 for the teachers is a decrease of 5 classroom teachers. Is there something driving that? Or am I misreading that?
So back to Roman numeral 16.
Yeah.
You'll see the breakdown of that. We are decreasing 2 high school FTEs, 3 middle school FTEs, and a teacher leader at the district level. We're increasing world language. We're adding 2 special ed teachers and then the 4 counselors. So you'll see the breakdown of all of those there.
Yes, I saw this, they had special ed and the counselors. But I'm just wondering, with the 2 high school, the teachers moving out of the classroom, for lack of a better term, is there a change in curriculum, or is there enrollment?
We're responding to
driven?
enrollment decline.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the counselors, this, it's not for people, it's more of an accounting measure. In other words, these
They're not new
counselors
positions.
have, there's 25 of them. We've only, like you said, we're avoiding the fiscal cliff. So it's 4 counselors being added to the budget, but in reality, there's been 25 people that have been doing the work for the last.
Right, we're not
4 or 5
doing new
years.
hiring, they're here.
Because they were 21, 22 was 14, now we're up to 25. And I suppose if we went back even further, that number would be even lower.
Okay.
Where in, I feel like I've heard the buzzword coaches. Where are coaches accounted for in here? What are they
They're in
entitled
the
to?
teacher line.
Regular ed or teacher, where are they? So coaches are,
In regular teacher lines.
467.20 includes coaches. How many coaches do you have?
At the elementary level, 4 in each school.
Are those actual just coaches, or are they like stipends to do after school activities?
No, these are teaching coaches.
Teaching coaches, yeah.
Like gym teachers,
Uh,
AKA old school.
Now, they're like
No.
coaches.
No, instructional coaches.
Instructional coaches.
Okay.
So they work with teachers.
So we shifted to a coaching model at no impact to the budget 3 years ago. So we decided to repurpose some positions and look at the support we provide kids and teachers through an instructional coach model. So we did that without any impact to the budget.
And are the teachers in residence part of that?
No, those are 2 teachers that will come on like a student teacher.
Okay.
And those are individuals with a bachelor's degree. They will go take coursework. They will be with a teacher all year long. At the end of that year, they will have enough of a coursework to, I think it's a DSAC, right?
It's a special cert, similar to a DSAC,
A special certification to allow them to teach, and they become our employees. And those are individuals of color to help us diversify our teaching staff.
And they would like turnover every year, is that like kind of a recruiting tool?
It is, yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Page 29, this may be one of the frequently asked questions, but 6100 group, the non-instructional supplies. It's not a huge jump, but a little bit of a jump of up to 281. Is there something driving that?
Those are the band uniforms that we spoke about.
Is that what it is, the band
Yeah.
uniforms?
So if you
Okay.
take a look at the main driver of that, if you look at the all schools line,
Yes,
um,
so that's what it's referring to then? Okay.
Yes.
I couldn't track the two.
I was gonna say, it was a lot of copy paper.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure about that. All right, thank you.
What's the jump from, in central admin, going from 58 to 79, and then the year before 15,000?
where are you trying to?
Same, just a couple line items up in 6100, non-instructional supplies. Central admin, page 29. Proposed $39,314 last year, $58,212 the year before, just shy of 16,000 expended.
Yeah, I think,
What is central admin doing? What is it?
take a deeper dive into that, but I think more of it is the anomaly of last year's 16,000. That's really, that accounts for copy paper, office supplies.
I mean, if you don't have to.
Yeah, off the top of my
Get
head.
back, that's fine. I was just curious, I mean, you see a relatively big jump. But you're right, it kind of reverts back to,
I think the anomaly was the
I
20.
think 21-22 was 74,000.
right.
Yeah.
Then up and down.
Just a general question, how do we handle student computers now? Are they purchased for a classroom, or are they, I just kind of lost track of
Every
how-
kid has one.
Every-
Chromebook.
So, they're, when they show up at school at the end of the year, they're handed a computer and the,
There's not a new one every year.
well, not a new one, but they, each pupil has it.
We're, the phrase in our world is we're a one-to-one district, so every child has their own device, and we have a refresh cycle
That's what it's cycle out.
every 3 to 4 years. 4
Roughly.
years.
I assumed it was something like that, but I just wasn't sure how it was.
It's a gift of COVID.
Yes, so,
We
okay.
had that plan anyway, but thank you,
Basically,
COVID.
I mean, obviously you can't, nobody can function without a computer these days, right? So, okay, thank you, I wasn't sure.
So even though they have Chromebooks, do they get snow days? Like, it
Yes, the
snows, so we don't
state
have to.
doesn't, the state doesn't allow you to have a virtual day to count as one of your 180s. Sorry, 180 days are required for school, so you can't have one of those days cannot be virtual.
Mr. Brennan, is that potentially for the non-instructional supplies, the band uniforms?
That's what we said, yes.
Yeah.
At all schools one, but the central admin is,
I didn't know if that was because it was in my budget, technically, since it's a district.
right.
Okay, well, I think I've run out of my inquiries. Does any other members of the board have any other questions, comments? Well, I say my last one, but I saved the best for last. You mentioned the playgrounds. Was that bonded or did that come out of operating expenses? It was bonded?
Usually bonded, but did.
I know we've done some bonding for playgrounds over.
Yeah, I thought
the
it
years.
was bonded.
Some were city, some were
Just trying to.
school.
Yeah, for instance, the Pumpkin Delight one is gonna be coming out of the project, so that would be bonded money. I think it's a combination of both,
Right.
Depending upon the size of the equipment. So, there are various playground structures at each school, so if there's a pre-K program there, there might be a smaller playscape type, like one for smaller students, and those don't account for a large, significant portion. That could be done with building and grounds projects money, for a larger one, or if we're doing a major overhaul of the school like Pumpkin Delight, that money is embedded into that bonded money there.
Okay. Speaking of bonds, do you, and this is probably the capital improvement plan, but thinking ahead to next year, is there any particular project that's on the horizon that we should be aware of, or is it too soon to tell? From a bonding standpoint.
Well, we do have a 5-year lookout
Right.
on capital improvement.
Right.
So, not everything we move to the mayor's office was moved forward, so we have a couple of those things that, which is normal.
Yeah, normal,
That happens
yeah.
every year. We don't always get what we want,
Yeah.
and that's okay. So we intentionally try to build that out across 5 years, so. We have the need to redo our culinary spaces at both high schools. They are more like home ec spaces right now, which is highly antiquated, and our goal in the area of career pathways is to ensure that kids are leaving us with industry standard certifications so that they can be immediately employable. So with that in mind, we want to build out full professional kitchens and have regular line of cooking, but also bake shop area and front of the house area. So we are looking at a 3-part culinary program to offer children opportunities in the area of food service prep and tourism. Hospitality, that's the word I was looking for, thank you, thank you. So we'd like to, and at law, that's gonna be an easier do than foreign. Foreign has, I don't know, probably a room this big with 5 ovens in it that looks like your grandma's kitchen. Really. Probably doesn't look
My
different.
grandmother's kitchen wasn't this big.
That's a very good point.
It's pretty common.
That's a very good
It wasn't
point.
this big.
So that's gonna be
Neither-
a big ask, and realize that like the tech ed, we might need to look at a 2-year spread on that. And then we need to move to the middle schools and revisit the tech ed spaces there. And actually, we're looking to bring home ec back to middle schools. and that will be, we'll need to be revisioning the use of facilities there, because there are no spaces with ovens and such. So we're looking at like a basic life skills class in the middle school in the future, how to boil water, how to change a light bulb, kind of stuff, which I think is in great need. So that's on the horizon for capital.
Is there, and forgive me if I missed this over the years, but, I mean, a couple miles away, we have Platte Tech. Is
So
there
few
any
kids
kind
get
of,
in there.
is there any kind of, because they have a lot of those programs, right? Like, is there any kind of reciprocal arrangement that could be had to say, you have, I mean, what it seems like a state-of-the-art facility, we have some curriculum that you may not be able to deliver there, let's do a recipient.
So we have a really great relationship with the new principal there. It hasn't always been the case. He's very open to partnerships, but there are some barriers to that. I think he only takes like 17 Milford kids a year. I'd have to get you the number. He has offered us after-school access to his facility. That doesn't work because kids are in sports, extracurriculars, et cetera. And what we're finding, Mr. Moulton, is that more and more kids want access to that type of learning that don't necessarily want to be in a full-blown tech school. So we're finding that with the notion of career pathways, a kid may even just want to take one course in that elective, even though their career pathway is in something completely different. So Platte Tech has a wait list every year. It is an incredible facility. I would encourage any of you to go see it, because in that's what a 21st century learning space looks like. And the kind, so if you take a look, and I'm hoping that we'll get the board there soon, but if you walk through their mechanical automotive room, and it looks like when I go get my car service, it's, you know, marble flooring, or not that that is where I go, but, you know. It's when I visited the Porsche side of my little, yeah, I messed that up completely.
Yeah, well, we understand.
It's getting late and I haven't had dinner, so I'm running on empty here.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I was thinking, and I think it may have come up when you first presented the tech project last year, but I think the thought is there some synergy that we can have between the fact that Platte is located, you know, a mile down the road or 2 miles down the road, but obviously there's probably logistical barriers.
Unless they're gonna take more of our kids, so.
Well, I was thinking, you know,
And
in
that
the old
causes a
days,
problem.
we
Right.
used to hop on a bus from Orange Ave to Central Grammar and go to Home Ec. And whether you could do something similar, you know, have a period from after lunch and bring interested students over to Platte Tech for the afternoon sessions or something like that.
So the magnet schools are set up that way, right? So we send our kids over to aquaculture for half a day, take courses, etc. But the technical high school system is not set up that way. It is a full enrollment, you have to apply and get in. That's why he, you know, even though he's great, he offered us after school. So,
Yeah, and there's implications, just like on our side of it with staffing needs, if we were bringing additional students to their programs and programs that are already filled and driven by staff, they would possibly need to hire additional staff members. There could be associated transportation costs that would come with this as well, so,
There's a lot of,
yeah,
a lot of factors.
yeah. And
Alright.
scheduling, matching up scheduling.
It just, with it being such a state-of-the-art facility,
Right.
it just kind of jumps out at you that,
It does.
you know, would be nice if it was possible.
so my answer was not comprehensive, it was just a couple things that came to my head, so I don't want you to be surprised if other things come.
Good.
And I think part of that would be the work of the study that we're currently engaging in as well too, could also bring light to some other possible areas. So these, like Dr. Tata said, we have that list right now of what our anticipated needs are. And going through that study could actually change some of that perspective on that list.
Understood, I just like to try to get a sense of.
And for the record, I think it's fair to say that we have 3 schools that remain that have not been touched, they haven't been renovated. There are 2 elementary and a middle. Oh, yeah.
Which one?
Live Oaks, Cap Pen, and Harborside.
And then,
All right, do Live Oaks. I thought we did Live Oaks a couple years ago. Maybe that was just
We still
before.
have the.
We put in a new loop at Live Oaks a couple years ago.
Parking vestibules in the front of the school, things like that.
Yeah, but not.
when
They
you look
still
at
have
full
their
scale,
media center in
no
those
kind of
schools, the elementary schools. They have 2 classrooms with a door in between that serve as their media center.
with a concrete wall that blocks about 75% of the classroom, so it's not an open space.
I thought Cap Pen was done too. Well, it'll be nice to see the plan. So, okay, I said that was it, and is there anything else? All right, well, again, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your time, I really appreciate
We'll get
all
back to
the
you on 2
information.
questions plus a report.
And if there's any other questions that come up,
You
you know where to find her.
Yeah. All right, well, again, thank you for putting up with us tonight, and
Always a pleasure, thank you.
have a good evening. And I'm sure we'll see you, maybe next week.
March 5th?
That's our technical session, we vote in 2 weeks.
March
3 weeks,
20th, right?
3 weeks, yes.
Do you need us present at the technical
You're
session?
welcome, but not necessary. I don't even think we rarely spend much time on the board ed budget, other than it's not allowed. But,
You know what, we'll come, and if you want to just,
yeah.
say, hey, this is the Board of Ed time, and we'll answer, and
Yeah, well, that's, I think, thinking
Okay.
back,
I think
we
you
put
start with
the
us,
discussion
right?
first, so you don't
Yeah.
have to spend 2 hours listening to public work.
Definitely
So,
not
yes, so
public
we'll
work.
see you, we'll see you in a week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, a motion for recess?
make a motion that we recess
Second.
till,
Thanks, Trevor, Kitchen.
I just could
we'll
not think of
reconvene
it.
on Tuesday, March 5th. This building, conference room C at 5:30 PM.
Excellent. Second by Lauren, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.